Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of JustJakeB on The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1. I'm going to probably do a breakdown for every single episode in The Mandalorian because I am probably the biggest Star Wars fan I know, and I want to talk about it because I just love to talk about Star Wars, and I'm going to plan on doing multiple of these episodes for kind of various things of nerdy news that comes out and maybe MCU casting or so forth. But for now, we're going to focus specifically on The Mandalorian Season 2. That being said, let's talk just the brief kind of overview of this episode. I really liked it. I really recommend it. If you liked the first season of The Mandalorian, you should watch this episode. I did think it was interesting that this episode got off to a very Star Wars-y start with some interesting introductions that weren't incredibly heavy-handed, which I'm very excited about, and that makes me, as a big Star Wars fan, very hopeful, but also concerned about how that's going to happen with also an audience that just watches The Mandalorian, as there's been rumors of TV show characters crossing over into Season 2. I get a little nervous that they're going to have to be very heavy-handed to explain certain TV characters to the layman audience that just has Disney Plus and watches the movies and now this show. That being said, I'm going to go do full spoilers. So you got like 2, 1, Boba Fett's back. And that's really, really cool. Yes, so Boba Fett, Temuera Morrison at the end of the episode was standing on a cliff in Tatooine looking at Din ride away with his armor that he lost, assuming in the Sarlacc pit, and that is incredibly interesting that he's still alive. Obviously, they've, during kind of expanded universe stuff before it all got wiped out by Disney, Boba Fett survived the Sarlacc pit. He escaped it by blowing it up, and then he, lived his life and eventually helped Han Solo in some books. But we're here, we're in this timeline, everything's gone, forget what you know. Boba Fett's back. I assumed that Temuera Morrison is playing Boba Fett. I think it'd be really weird for having him play a different clone that we've never seen and then get really confusing. So he's Boba Fett, and he's back, which is awesome. And I really like their introduction of how they kind of went about him, and we'll get to that eventually. I want to go through kind of the beginning of the episode all the way through to the end briefly. This will probably be about 5 minutes of me nerding out on all the cool Star Wars stuff. So you start on some very dark, desolate planet where there's a underground world fight happening. One-eyed man and Din and the child, Baby Yoda, arrive. That was my email notification if you heard it. Arrive, and it's very interesting to see him kind of engage these men in a much more frenetic and fun fight sequence than I think we got a lot in Season 1. There was some exciting gunfights and stuff in Season 1, but nothing compared to, I think, how he moves, and he has a knife at one point that he's chucking in guys, and it's really exciting. It's very fun. And then, of course, he gets kind of a Batman-esque moment outside with the guy hanging upside down and I'm not going to kill you, but I'm not going to save you kind of moment. And that was very cool to see him look for, he's looking for more Mandalorians. And the big reveal of this guy saying, I know where one is, and he's on Tatooine. As a Star Wars nerd, that's, I don't know if I love Boba Fett, but I think he's very interesting. And if they can make him an actually full fleshed out character, I think that's really exciting because he's really only had like 4 minutes of screen time in the original trilogy. He just looks really cool. Then going to Tatooine, I think we went to Tatooine in the first season last time, and it was a little more of like a wink nod, nostalgia trip of like, look where Tatooine's at. The punk kid with the earring was sitting in the Han Solo seat doing basically the same thing, and you're like, you're not Han Solo, stop. We do see one of my least favorite characters from that first season, which was the older woman who watched over Baby Yoda while Mando was on Tatooine. And that was whatever, but I think we're going to see a lot of these characters again and again as kind of, oh yeah, cool, like it's familiar, it's safe. That being said, I think this episode is way more like Star Wars-y nerd focused than the last episodes in Season 1. And as a big fan, that made me really excited for where this season can go, but a little nervous as I spoke about in the front. I did record this episode twice, so I don't know if I talked about that in the front, but the introductions of possibly Ahsoka and Sabine make me nervous on how they can explain that to a modern audience. But they seem to do pretty well with Boba Fett, so we'll see. So then we get to go to another Moss port, just like Espa and Isley, and seeing the Mandalorian, in this kind of interesting area, but then really meeting the Marshal, or guy dressed in Boba Fett's armor, and having him come in and being like unnervingly not Boba Fett and tall and lanky, and the helmet kind of only went to here, and having that kind of something's not quite right feeling was a really cool way to experience it as, a fan that was like, that's not Boba Fett. Having someone think that maybe is him would be a fun little reveal that it's not. And having the explanation of how this man got the armor and the city he protects. And it's really seemed like when the Empire went down, the New Republic didn't fix anything. It just became even more of a wild, wild west, which I think is very exciting for us. And then as a nerd to get a crate dragon, like actually in Star Wars, rather than just the skeleton on Tatooine when R2 and 3PO land, was really cool as someone who played Knights of the Old Republic, the video game, back when I was 10, fighting the Krayt Dragon skeleton that's there. That was cool to actually see one live action, and having them have to take this thing down with Tusken Raiders was awesome. I think the way that they've kind of shown how Tusken Raiders communicate and more of like the in-depth little particles of Star Wars universe rather than just the big grandiose force stuff that we see a lot, especially in the sequels, was really cool. I think it's really interesting how they communicate with sign language and grunts. And it was a little unnerving having the Mandalorian like do the grunts with them, where it was obviously not Pedro Pascal, the actor, saying that, but whatever, we'll move past it. And then getting to the actual like fight of this Krayt Dragon was awesome. Little side note, I thought it was really cool detail that the Marshal's speeder bike was, in fact, a pod racer engine, and it kind of looked like Anakin Skywalker's from episode 1. Thought that was really cool. But then going into the fighting of the Krayt Dragon was an awesome, exciting fight that was on a much larger scale than anything we saw in season 1. And it worked really well. I thought how the Mando went about fighting and killing, and it was like, this was an exciting piece of action that had some really good suspense. It wasn't just like, they're going to beat him, whatever. It was really cool. So seeing all that play out, I thought that was very fun. And then going into, like I said, the reveal of Tamara Morrison standing on the hilltop in this cloak, looking over this man that just took his armor, and having them not like hide that he's in this show, I think is really fun, because we already kind of knew that he was. There was a lot of rumors. Disney was renewing trademarks and everything. So seeing Boba Fett like here, and looks like he's going to be a main character. Is he good? Is he a bad guy? Trying to get on the good side of the Imperial Remnant. That's exciting. And I think that The Mandalorian season 2 has a lot of interesting places it can go. And I'm really curious to see how that plays out. That being said, I'm a little nervous, like I've talked about before. Like when Ahsoka gets introduced, how do you explain 7 seasons of cartoons to someone that's never seen her at all? And having her be the face of those cartoons in the animated series and a huge part of the universe for really in-depth fans, I think is an interesting challenge that they'll have to face. But Rosario Dawson's a great actress. I'm sure she'll do well at the role. It's just explaining who these people are. That being said, with everything and kind of seeing the trailers that look like we were getting Greef and Cara, the shock trooper and Carl Weathers back, I think was interesting to not have them in this episode and really focus on just Boba Fett. And that's where this story is the more of the Mandalorians. And what other characters are we going to see? Are we going to see Bo-Katan from animated come into this? And we don't even know much about Giancarlo Esposito's villain and this guy who has the Darksaber, which is a whole other wrinkle in it. But season 2, I think, has got off to a great start. I can't wait for the episode 2. I kind of wish their whole thing was here now. My other kind of thing, I know I'm talking really fast and giving a lot of info. My other little detail is I hope that this flows better week to week than season 1, because season 1 had a lot of duds, I think, watching it week to week. And going through and watching it all at once, it's a lot more entertaining, and you can kind of forgive the bad episodes. And going from watching The Boys on Amazon, which was 3 episodes and then week to week, I felt like every episode really had moments that stood out and impactful, and like that's why I watched the show. Where The Mandalorian season 1 didn't have that for me, and as a big Star Wars fan, I think that was kind of a miss on Disney's part, and it looks like they're getting to more of a continuous storyline. I hope. I'm a little nervous, but I'm very excited to see where this goes. How much is Boba Fett going to be in this show? Are we going to see a lot more other clones? And Captain Rex from the animated show is a clone. Like, is he coming back? I mean, what can happen is very exciting and interesting. And then what mysteries lay ahead? And what's the deal with Baby Yoda? It's all very exciting. This was JustJakeB on Mandalorian, episode 1 of season 2, The Marshal. I'll be here next week talking about episode 2 as well. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, do all that jazz. And tell your mother about this show. She might like it.